Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners. It is a beautiful mid-September day here in suburban Chicago. It's kind of breezy, the sun is out, the sky's a little hazy, which I imagine is from the fires out west, or it's just cloudy today. But overall, it's a nice day to be out for a walk and chit-chatting with you. Well, a nod of appreciation goes out to Jason Keglovitz, J. Kegs, who posted a couple responses to my call for Q&A/episode ideas over on the Pick Up and Deliver Guild. They're all great, Jason. Thank you for the input. I'm taking advantage of one of those today to ponder a little bit about my online play. Jason writes, I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, or Jason suggests that I talk about the pros and cons of in-person versus asynchronous play. Are there certain games that I prefer in one format versus another? Jason says that he likes AP-heavy games for online play presumably because the pressure to make a decision quickly is not there, because you can make a decision at whatever pace you like. As a start, I will say I really enjoy both kinds of play. I really enjoy asynchronous play. I really enjoy in-person play. All things being equal, I would almost always rather play in person. I have no problem playing a long game. I generally don't mind it. I'm happy to take a break and come back to a table later. My daughter and I have done asynchronous play on a table before, where we set the game up and then we just check in on it. We take turns checking in on it. So we've done it that way, or sometimes we'll play online using the asynchronous tools like Yukata or Board Game Arena. That said, I have played games with people where the AP got a little out of control or wasn't as fun. You know, a 3 or 4 person game with a bunch of people who have AP can be a bit of a drag. And if you're in a place where your time is limited, like I know we've had games that we started in person at Toggle, my local game club, and we had to curtail the game or rush the end because we started it too late and the bar was closing. So the time pressure of the space is one of the downsides to in-person gaming. There's also the element of the physical, right? That you have to be careful with what you're eating. You can knock over the table. So what are some of the games that aren't great that way? You know, any game that's got a ton of little pieces and a fragile game state, playing in person can be a real drag that way. So Terraforming Mars is the classic example, right? Those cheapo, flat little player boards that are so easily bumped. Those kinds of games make it really can be trouble when you're playing in person. You know, there's also the problem of spilling food on the board. There's the problem of ruining components, like if you get a card bender or somebody with greasy fingers or something. But these are all minor problems for me, and very few of them would eliminate a game from play. I think the other downside to asynchronous play or in-person play is rules adherence. That one of the downsides to tabletop gaming in general, and I don't know that I would call it a downside, but I'm thinking about the affordances of each of the mediums here. Affordance, of course, meaning the way that a thing encourages us to do a thing, right? Like a fork affords poking food, a spoon affords scooping it. Hopefully that helps. So another downside to in-person gaming is rules adherence. That when you're playing a tabletop game, the game doesn't remind you to do things. The number of times that I've been playing a game and we forgot to do X, Y, or Z. Even just, playing Mariposas recently, after each season goes, if you have a butterfly left, you're supposed to spawn it into the board for that season. Like when spring turns to summer, if you have any level 2 butterflies left unspawned, you get to spawn one for free onto the board. We forgot that last time we played, and we got halfway into round 2, and then we realized that one person still had a number 2 butterfly left. That sort of thing's very easy to do in a tabletop in-person game. Whereas when you're playing online, if you're using a asynchronous scripted game like the ones on Yukata or Board Game Arena, they won't let you cheat that way. There might be games where you have an option to do something and it will give you a general option, like in La Granja, there's a whole bunch of things you can do anytime you want, and it just says, do you want to do any anytime actions? But that's not the game. It's allowing you to do the thing, but it's not a moment that you're supposed to remember. Whereas like at the end of a round of Through the Ages, it automatically has you do all the things that you need to do. So that's a con of in-person gaming. I would say another con of in-person gaming, this should be evident by the fact that I'm not doing as much in-person gaming as I used to, but you could get sick from the other people at the table. This is not an inconsequential problem today on the day that we passed the 200,000 death mark here in the United States, which is so inconceivable to me that I'm not going to talk about it anymore except to lament the state of things. But let's not forget the pros, right? For me, the biggest thing that gaming does is it is the social experience. It builds a community between the players. It allows you to engage with people, whether you know them very well or know them hardly at all. It's fun, though I wouldn't say the fun is necessarily one or the other more. It's also tactile. I mean, one of the big things I like about tabletop gaming is moving the bits around. It's part of why I like solo gaming. You're still moving the bits around, you're having fun playing with the components, and you don't get to do that in the digital form. So those are all affordances of the in-person form. Now the asynchronous. Jason already mentioned the biggest one, which is you have plenty of time to think. Assuming you're playing an asynchronous game where you get plenty of time, which is what I was thinking we were talking about, you can think about your move for a while. You can puzzle it out. On the better platforms, you can actually make the move, and as long as you haven't advanced past a randomized point, you can back it up. The number of times, especially in Through the Ages, where, in Through the Ages you get 5 or 6 or more actions every turn. I'll make 5 actions, get to the end of my turn and be like, I'm not satisfied with the way that's turning out. Or more often, like, I didn't spend enough resources this turn to avoid having a revolt, or to avoid losing some to corruption, or there's a whole bunch of things you have to kind of keep track of or I used too many workers and now I'm going to have unhappy workers. So all of these things get in the way, or all of these things work really well in Through the Ages online because you can just back up and take your turn again. One of the downsides, as an aside to the Board Game Arena implementation of Through the Ages, is that you can't back up one step. You have to start your whole turn over. So I've had a number of turns where I figure out the first 3 moves I want to make, and then I make the wrong move for the 4th thing, and then I have to start over and I have to make the first 3 again. And so it becomes this sort of dance. But that's kind of silly. So having talked about the in-person games, and obviously the other advantage of asynchronous play is that you can play a bunch of games at the same time. You can play a bunch of games with a lot of different people at the same time. You can play games with people from all over the place at the same time. And you can play games you don't physically own. If you are a subscriber to something like Board Game Arena or Yukata or Boîte à Jeux, those are the 3 asynchronous sites I use. All of those allow for excellent level of play in varying levels of quality in terms of graphics. All right, so I thought I would spend, that's about half the episode, talking a little bit about why I like or dislike some aspects of synchronous or asynchronous play. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about which games I play a lot asynchronously and why. And then maybe a little bit which games I really don't like to play asynchronously. So the top contender for games I play asynchronously is games people want to play with me. I'm very open to playing lots of different games. So what are the things that really attract me? Like Jason, I think AP heavy games are a strong contender for asynchronous play because you can spend as long as you like thinking about your turn and not worry about the other. Or within reason. You don't want to, most of these games have a time limit of like a week. So you shouldn't spend a week thinking about your turn. But when I go to take my turn, I don't feel bad spending 5 minutes thinking about it. Whereas at the table, I like to be ready to take my turn when it's my turn. I don't want to sit and think for 5 minutes while everyone else is staring at me, or worse, staring at their phones. So long AP heavy games, particularly those that have long personal turns, where you're doing a bunch of stuff yourself before you pass your turn to the next player. That is a particularly good format for playing games online. So something like I said, Through the Ages is a top choice for me. Agricola, I really like, mostly because that one is very AP inducing. Your turns are relatively short, but I have to think a lot about each turn, or often do. Through the Ages, like I said, takes a long time to do a turn. Other complex games that have a lot of steps, something like Clans of Caledonia and Terra Mystica, those are both games that I spend a lot of time playing, and I think games that provoke a lot of thinking. In that regard, the second level are games that I don't get to play at home because they don't fit my home group. So mostly the games that some people might call soulless Euros, I don't think of them that way. I like to think about the theme that I'm pursuing. But games like Concordia or Castles of Burgundy, these are games that I've played Concordia once in person and Castles of Burgundy 0 times, but I've logged more than 10 plays of each online. Some of them much more than that. And so this is a game that theme-wise isn't going to get played at my house, and sort of content-wise, the kind of game that you're playing when you play something like Concordia is just not going to go over at my house. My daughter would play it, certainly, because she is an Omni gamer, but we don't have time usually to play those games. So the combination of them taking a long time, but also then being a theme that my wife wouldn't enjoy, means that I get to play them more there. Which reminds me, if Board Game Arena had Everdell, I think Everdell might be an interesting and productive game to get to play asynchronously, because it's got so much. You're building your own tableau, you're doing your own thing, and then you're occasionally connecting to what other people are doing. But generally, you're not doing anything to them. It's all self-contained. It's just you're taking work. So worker placement actually is the way most worker placement games go that don't have direct interaction works really well. So those are the two main categories of games that I really like to play. The third category is games I just don't get to play that much at home, but games I really like. Innovation is a good example of this. I really enjoy playing Innovation a bunch of times to try to get the feel for it, and to try to get a sense of what's working and what's not working as I learn the strategies. So that's one of the games that have a lot of depth. I enjoy playing in these asynchronous forms, especially if I'm able to find another person who also seems to want to play it a lot. Like Agricola, I think I'm on game 12 with Kevin Berendt, another person who listens to the Blue Peg Pink Peg forum. Or Through the Ages, I've played literally 43 games now against the same opponent, and I've yet to beat him, so he's very good. But actually, that's helping. It's giving me a lot. I'm learning a lot and really enjoying it. That's another element of asynchronous play, is that I can get in a lot of games over time and have a kind of sustained experience that is harder to do face to face, because my table time is limited in ways that asynchronous play is not so much. So what are the games I don't want to play asynchronously? Well, the main one would be dexterity games. Any game that requires me to be physically dexterous doesn't work online, obviously. Games that have very short turns I find are less fun online because you don't really get time to generate the process. Some of them I still enjoy quite a bit, like for instance, Carpe Diem has pretty short turns, but I really enjoy that one online. But what's an example of one? I don't know. Maybe that's a false dichotomy because I am enjoying some, like Carcassonne isn't really a game I enjoy playing asynchronously because your turns are so short that by the time I get there and do my turn, it feels inconsequential because you're just doing this one thing. You're putting one tile down. Maybe you're putting one meeple. And so those are my least favorite probably to engage with. I also am not as keen on, despite the fact that I have learned and started to really appreciate a few games online, I think asynchronous play is not the ideal way to learn a game. I would much rather learn a game synchronously. Now, like I said, I've gotten to try out a bunch of games by playing them asynchronously, but generally when I play a regular game synchronously for the first time, the first play, I talk about it as a learning game, but I generally get to experience the whole game and I usually can see how it fits together pretty well. When I play a game asynchronously for the first time, it's usually just kind of a wash. I just have to figure out how things go. And it's super easy to forget rules as you play because you're not holding it all in your head at once. You're kind of spreading it out. So learning a game through asynchronous play is not my favorite. But again, these are degrees of pleasure. If my choice is don't learn the game or learn it asynchronously, I'll try it asynchronously. If the people I'm playing with recognize that my first game I'm not going to be very good at it, and my second game I'll probably still not be very good at it, I'm interested to keep trying and to play those games. So learning games is not my ideal asynchronous play, but again, better than not playing. That is my sense of what I like and dislike about asynchronous play online versus in-person play or synchronous play online. I'm curious for you listeners, what do you find to be... so one other disadvantage to online play, and this is both in-person this is both synchronous and synchronous, is unintuitive interfaces. That there are sometimes where the choices the people making the digital implementation of the game made to allow you to do a particular action is not always intuitive about how you would do that. For example, I'm playing La Granja right now, and one of the actions you take is to upgrade a good into another good. And the way that you do that is by clicking on the initial good, and then it opens up the spot for the upgrade. My inclination should be that the spot for the upgrade should be clickable, and I click it and it pulls it from the good spot rather than making me click on the good. But, once I figured it out, it made sense. I just, when the game's designer didn't, or the digital implementation designer did not make the same choice you would have, it feels a little clunky. But that's a sort of side note. So hopefully that was an amusing diversion for you. If you're interested in trying asynchronous play, I would love to play some games with you. Many of the listeners of the podcast are already playing games with me here and there, but I'm always looking for more. I've noticed that my number of concurrent running games has dropped precipitously, so I don't have that many going on right now, so I wouldn't mind picking up a few more games. If you're interested in being one of those gaming partners, drop me a line. You can swing by our Board Game Geek Guild 3269 over on Board Game Geek, or you can email me, brendan@rattleboxgames.com. I appreciate any contact I have and any feedback about the show. Speaking of which, if you enjoy the show, consider telling a friend. Don't let it be daunting that we're on episode 264. As you know, this is just a casual conversation, and so anybody can join at any time. And I would certainly enjoy having more listeners. So, with that said, I'm very grateful for the listeners I do have. Thank you for joining me today. And I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye now.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.